Welcome back everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to be breaking down the new season changes through the perspective of a top laner. So I'm going to be going through all the big changes one by one and really breaking down how this affects the role as a whole and the champions that we'd like to play. So let's get started here. You can see they're trying to call it season 1, don't worry about that. They're trying to overcomplicate it. But as for the highlights here, so we will go through the changes in detail, but something that's really interesting is how little they are changing the meta in this season. So the champions are barely touched, there's some 80 carries, we don't care about them. And the items, there were some item nerfs, I'm surprised they're not up here on the image, but the changes they're making doesn't really change the meta that much. A lot of the champions that are really good at the moment are going to stay strong, and likewise, the champions that are quite weak at the moment aren't really getting anything that helps them out. The changes to TP, the new neutral, all of these changes doesn't really affect the meta that much for top lane point of view. So keep in mind the champions that are currently strong are going to be the ones that are good on the new season. So we'll scroll down here. You can see one of the biggest changes is definitely Atakhan, the new neutral objective. Now, this objective is definitely overhyped at the moment. I'm going to be going against the grain here. It's really strong, don't get me wrong. It's a very good objective. Way more useful than objectives like Herald and Dragon, but way less useful than Baron. So that makes sense. It's going to spawn before Baron, and it does want to be stronger than the ones before it, the objectives like Dragon and Herald. So it definitely makes sense, but it's not as broken as people are making it out to be. So it spawns at 20 minutes, so very similar to Baron, well, the exact same time as Baron, but the difference is it's way easier to kill. So it's going to be contested pretty much every game. We're in a lot of games with Baron. A lot of players are scared of Baron, and it's also very difficult to kill. So most of the time, Baron's not really getting taken until 23, 25 minutes. So this is going to be almost a guaranteed fight on the spot, especially the first month that it's out. Everyone is going to be clumping up and fighting around this objective, so that in turn makes split pushing champions a little bit weaker. So champs like Trundle, champs like Yorick, their value does go down a little bit, as this is almost a guaranteed team fight that you have to make. Now, you can still create pressure and pull somebody away from it, let your team play that 4v4, but that means you're going to have less influence over it, so those champions' value will definitely go down a little bit in my opinion. Now, as for the buff itself, there's two versions to it. So if there's a really volatile game, there's going to be the Ruinous one, and if the game is not that volatile, we're going to get the Voracious one. Now, the one where there's not a volatile game, I'd say is even a little bit stronger than the other one, to be honest, because you can see here, every kill you get after this, so from 20 minutes, a lot of games go to 30, 35, I would say, maybe around 30. So every kill you get, 40 bonus gold, that's really going to stack up for the rest of the game, and the GA. Now, the GA is not as strong as people are making it out to be, I would say, because it only lasts 2.5 minutes. Now, think of a situation that you've had at some point where you got Elder Dragon without Baron. Elder Dragon, way more powerful than this, of course, but if you're versus a team with decent wave clear, they just clear waves under tower, they don't really fight you, and the buff fades away. Well, that can happen here. Baron is going to spawn after you have this buff here, so you're not going to be able to utilize it for a Baron fight. Maybe you get a dragon off of it, but how often do you have 3 dragons at 21 minutes in solo queue? So I would say, even though this is really good if the enemy team does fight you, and you can play more aggressive and play more volatile inside, it's not bad, don't get me wrong, it's still very strong, but it's not as broken as people make it out to be, as the enemy team, after a month or two of this being out, they're just going to play more respectful, clear waves under tower, and wait for this to drop off, very similar to what you do when the enemy team has Elder Dragon. Now, as for the other buff here, you can see, upon getting the Ruinous Atakhan, the team that slays him gets 25% increase to all epic monsters. This is also pretty trash. So at the moment, dragons are definitely an overrated objective. You've probably heard me say that before. So let's say you got an Infernal Dragon and a Mountain Dragon. Realistically, maybe you're getting 6 or 9 AD from the Infernal, and maybe 10 or 15 Armor and MR from the Mountain Dragon, which is not bad at all. It's not bad, but 25 increase to that, you're maybe getting an extra 3, 4 AD. It's not really going to be that big of a deal. Now, if you have 3 dragons getting to 4, of course, it's going to matter a lot, but if you're winning that hard, probably you're going to win the game anyway. It's not going to be a huge difference in power. And as for the bloody petals, this one is quite strong as well, as you get quite a lot of them, 6 large and 6 small, with a large one having 3 petals in each one, so you're going to be getting quite a large amount of them. I don't really know if they all spawn straight away, but if you can collect most of them, that's quite a lot of XP for your team, as you get between 25 and 50 XP for your entire team. So the player that picks it up, their entire team gets between 25 and 50 XP, which is quite a lot, because around that time you're going to be level 13, level 14. So a level is going to be around 1200 XP-ish. So you might be able to get half a level off it if you get enough of these plants. I don't really know how exactly the petals work, but it is quite strong. You also get adaptive force as well. That's definitely going to add up. So definitely strong. I'd say the Ruinous one is pretty strong, probably a bit stronger than the Ferocious one. The GA is nice, and you can do some crazy dives and stuff like that, but you're still giving over a pedal and 100 gold, so you don't want to suicide just because you have it. It does allow you to play more aggressive, but versus players that know what they're doing, and especially if they have good wave clear, they can stall it out in a lot of these games. Now, with the other one, I'd say a huge benefit of it is the 25%. Like I said, the dragons are useless, but if you're in a game where you're just dominating top and you carry the early game, and you can get 6 void grubs, 25% increase to that, 6 grubs, especially if you're playing a champion that can pressure side lane, that's going to be a really nice quality of life as well. And of course, that's going to make Dragon Soul OP. But again, if you got Dragon Soul in the current patch, and if you have Dragon Soul in this one, you're still probably going to win the game anyway. So a 25% increase to that, even though it's nice, it's not going to be that game changing, I'd say. Now, as for Baron spawning at 25, now this is a much bigger change to the game than I think people give it credit for, as it's really hard to close out a game if you don't have Baron. Where before, if you're really fed, you can rock up to Baron at 20 minutes, and you're carrying the game on an early bruiser like an Olaf or a Renekton. Champ like Aatrox, you're extremely strong at 2 items. 1 to 2 items is your sweet spot. That's when you want to be carrying all the boats. So if you rock up as a 2-item Renekton and hard carry a Baron fight, that's how you speed up a game. Now you can still do that to Atakhan, and that's still going to be huge for your team, but it's not really going to be the huge game closing objective that Baron is. So now you have to wait till 25 minutes where a lot of people can start to get 3 items. So champions that spike harder have 3, champs like Camille, champs like Gwen, their value will go a bit higher here. But it really just depends. I'd say at the start, because everyone's just going to be full on headbutting each other at Atakhan, champs that spike around that time are going to be really good. But later on, when people start to stabilize in the meta, I'd say champions that come online later on, level 16, 3 items, the 25-minute Baron is going to be a little bit better for them as well. Now, for the respawning Nexus tiles, that's not really that big of a difference. I actually like it. I think having comeback potential is nice in a game, and if you have an open Nexus, really hard to come back. Now, for Feats of Strength, out of all the changes to the game, typically, I'm somebody that likes every single season changes just because it's fresh, but this is the one change that I'm not a big fan of. So for those of you who don't know, just to quickly summarize, if you get 2 out of 3 quests done, so First Blood, First Tower, or 3 Epic Monsters, you get the buff, the Feat of Strength. Now, the reason I don't like it is because jungle has the most influence by far on all 3 of these objectives. If there's jungle gap in the game already, it already doesn't feel that great, doesn't feel amazing, but now if they can just get First Blood, get 6 Void Grubs, camp top, and just siege the tower down. It doesn't really happen that much in lower brackets, but in higher brackets, if the jungler is strong and playing on top side for grubs, they're just going to rock up to top, dive you, or siege the tower and just blow it up. So they have a lot of influence. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have any. If you're smurfing in top lane, if you're really good at laning, of course you can get first blood and first tower by yourself. So you can single-handedly get it, but on average, the jungle is going to have the most influence on it, and first blood being really important in a role where jungle can influence all 3 lanes is going to make it quite annoying. Now, just keep in mind with this, level 1, you have to be really switched on. No more watching YouTube videos until 1 minute 30. You really have to lock in and play for a level 1, because if you're the reason you die, or if you're not grouped up and your team does, or you miss out on killing them, it's a lot bigger of a deal now than it was before. Now, the changes that you actually get when you do get the Feat of Strength, you instantly get all of these upgrades to your boots. Not all of them, whatever boot you have, of course. This isn't that big. It's nice, it's quality of life, but it's around 100 to 200 gold worth of stats, depending on which one you have. So, plated steel caps, you can see it, plus 5 armor. Cloth armor is 15 armor, 300 gold, so that's about 100 gold worth of stats. So same with attack speed, a dagger 10%, 250, around 125, so they're all pretty similar. Movement speed, it's a bit lower in terms of gold value, but it's hard to put a number on how much valuable movement speed is, as you can't really buy it on many champions apart from Tattoo Boots, so I'd say all roughly very similar. Now, as for the boot upgrades themselves, this is pretty strong in a way people aren't thinking of, I would say. Now, the boots themselves are strong, right? Don't get me wrong. All of them are pretty strong with the synchronized souls, just being whatever. It doesn't really affect us. I'll go through all of them. But the reason I believe this is quite strong is because most of the time, you get your second item, and just keep in mind, you can't upgrade your boots until 2 items. Most games, you get your second item between 16 and 21, 22 minutes. So roughly around 18, 19, 20, you should have your second item, unless you're having a horrible game, and maybe a bit earlier if you're having a great game. So that's when you can upgrade this, and the reason that's important is if you're playing pretty well, or really well, if you're ahead of your opponent, you can have 2 items and the boots upgrade before the Atakhan 20-minute fight. And the reason that's important is at the moment, even if your team is winning, if you rock up to an early Baron fight, most of the time, everyone on your team is going to be 2 items, unless there's some crazy guy Tenno, something like that. You're all going to be around 2.5 items, let's say if you're winning, and the enemy team will be all 2 items. That's not that big of a difference in power, because let's say you're playing Camille, and you have Triforce, Ravenous Hydra, and like a Steel Sigil or a Caulfield's Hammer. You're building towards Death Stance. That really doesn't do that much. It's not going to be the difference maker in really many fights, but a boot upgrade is another spike that you can pick up on that timer. So you're going to be a lot stronger for that 20-minute Atakhan fight. You're going to be 2 items and tier 3 boots when everyone else is going to be 2 items or maybe even 1.5 if they're behind. So it's such a big difference in power when now instead of people having 2 items in Blasting Wand or Pickaxe or Caulfield's Hammer, it's going to be a whole item. Now, you can see him going through the changes one by one. I'm not a big fan of this one. I feel like it's going to be really annoying to play against. But Berserker Grief, so pretty much 80 carries, or champs like Yone and Yasuo, they're going to be getting movement speed over 2 seconds upon hitting a champion. So they get a free phage pretty much in their boots, and also some extra stats as well. So really strong for them. If you're versing champs like Jinx, champs like Aphelios, they're going to have a lot more movement speed. That's going to be a lot harder for you to stick onto them, especially if you're playing champs like Aatrox or champs like Olaf. This change is going to be a bit annoying for you. Now for the cooldown boots one, this one is a little bit weak. Boots already, the cooldown boots already are quite weak, but hitting a champion with an ability gives you movement speed, 8% range, 10%, which is okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's still great, don't get me wrong, but the other ones are just stronger. So I'd avoid these boots still, like you've been doing on the previous patch, because you'll see very shortly how strong this one is and how strong these ones are. It's not going to be worth going it most of the time. Now for the Sulks boots upgrade, this is really huge for champs like Rumble, champs like Mordekaiser even you can start building it on. Actually, you'd still go these on Mord, that's a bad example. Champs like Rumble, Kennen, Aurora, this is going to be a huge change for them. So you're going to be getting flat magic pin and percent magic pin. So this item's going to be really strong. It's going to give you such a big spike at 20 minutes, which a lot of the time, people can't really build MR that early in the game, apart from maybe bruisers or tank junglers, and no one plays them. You're always going to have Graves and Nidalee champs like that, so the damage for you on champs like Rumble, champs like Kennen, when you rock up to that Atakhan fight at 20 minutes, is going to be extremely high against squishies. Now, for the 2 defensive ones, you get a shield based on level. So it's not 10 per level, it's a little bit lower than that. So again, you're going to be around level 13 for the Atakhan fight. So if you have this, and let's say you have 3k HP, you're going to get 120 from the percent, so around 110 maybe from this. So about a 230 HP shield, it's not going to be bad at all when you take physical damage, so that's going to feel really good. You're going to have pretty much a mini Camille passive, I'd say, so that's going to feel great. The cooldown's so long, you're probably only going to get it once in a team fight, I'd assume, maybe twice, but it's still going to be a nice change for you. Now, for the Merc Treads, it's going to be the exact same thing. This one's going to be even more important. Magic Shields, I've found, are a bit more impactful against certain champions, like a Syndra, or a Brand, or a Kali, champs like that. Physical is still great, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Merc Treads' value's gone up a little bit, because at the moment, Merc Treads feel horrible to buy. But now with this, that you get a lot more MR and you get a lot more from the shield, where building MR can be tricky on a lot of top lane champs. There's not many MR items that feel amazing on certain champs, where if you think Renekton, you can go more, it feels okay. You can go a full tank item like Kainagruken, doesn't feel that great. But with this item, you can pretty much avoid needing to do that, as you're going to get a lot of MR and the big magic shield from it, especially if they have the CC as well. So Merc Treads feel a little bit nicer here, but of course Tabby's still going to be completely broken. Now for Swifty boots, this is a good change for range tops, which is why you probably don't want to hit, but increase total movement speed by 4%, really good for champs like Teemo, champs like Aurora, and certain matchups of Aurora versus like an Olaf or something like that can be really annoying. Champs like Nar especially really going to like this. So that can be, because Swift boots are still going to be really cheap. So champs like Nar, champs like Teemo to get it first recall, that's going to be nice for them. 4% increase is quite a lot. And as for the Synchronized Souls, we don't really worry about that. That's for support players or mid-Nunu players. And hopefully none of you are playing those champs. Now, for Cassiopeia, just for the Cassio top mains out there, this change is pretty good, 6 instead of 4 per level. The thing is, it's weaker than the other boots, right? However, you got to keep in mind, you don't have to spend money on it. So you don't have to spend the 750 gold. As soon as you get your second item, if you have the Feat of Strength, you're going to get the movement speed increase straight away. So it will feel nice. I'd say it won't feel as good to be Casso compared to, let's just say, Kennen, another AP range top, because these items are just so strong, these Spell Singer shoes. So I'd say in terms of an overall buff or nerf for Casso, a little bit of a nerf, but not really that big of a deal for her. Moving on to teleport. Now, this is a pretty big change to the spell. I'd say not as big as people think. They're trying to say, oh, it takes you so long to get to lane now. We want people to not take it so often. But there's pros and cons to it. So being able to TP bottom is huge, of course, even though it takes 8 seconds to get there from Fountain. If the enemy bot lane is committed and you have a deep ward bottom, like a tier 3 bush, if you remember how League was a couple years back, you'd always type, please ward lane bush for them. And a lot of the time they would, so if you can get a lane ward down, for a bot lane, even though if their enemy team is playing for tower or trying to dive, you can get a great flank. So now you can have a higher influence in the early game. So that's going to be great for top lane. Now, as for TPing back to lane, there's pros and cons. If you're winning your matchup, it's actually a little bit better because let's say you want to be crashing a wave and TPing back to pressure them, or TP back and maybe move to a fight, something like that. You can TP now to the wave. So before you TP to tower, about 4 seconds, and then walk back to the wave. That would take longer than 8 seconds to get there anyway, so now you can just TP straight to the wave or a ward in top river and be way more involved in the game a lot faster. So definitely, people are still going to take TP every game. On champs that took it before. On champs that are kind of a toss-up, where you can take Ignite or TP. I'll say you can take Ignite more often on champs like Renekton, champs like Set, compared to taking TP, the majority of games. Still perfectly fine, but I'd say the change isn't that much because the pros, I'd say, even outweigh the cons with the summoner spell. 8 seconds is a long time, but if you're TPing to a wave that you'd have to walk to anyway, you can see that time really balances out, or in fact, it's a little bit faster for you. And being able to TP straight to the wave instead of the tower can make it a lot harder for your enemy team, your enemy top to crash a wave if you want to TP back and freeze that. So great for them. So definitely a buff overall, I'd say, to top lane, especially being able to be more involved in the map, TPing to a dragon fight or a bot river, anything like that. Even though it takes you so long to get there and they see it coming, the fact that you can actually be there, that threat even during your TP channel, might even stop your team from dying or guarantee you that dragon, or maybe you actually get the playoff and get the flank bottom. So definitely a buff overall for top lane. Definitely excited to test it out. Now, moving on to lane minions. So probably the second biggest change for top lane. Now, the biggest part of this, I'll say, is the first cannon minion spawning on wave 4. This is a pretty big deal. A lot of figured out, I'd say solved, wave control tactics is based around cannon being on wave 3. So 3-wave crash, trimming wave 4 and 5, trying to kill them on the bounce back, the classic, cheater recalling. So wave 4 cannon is going to change that a lot. And it's not just wave 4 cannon, also the wave dies a lot faster now. Not a lot faster, a little bit faster. They've made it so the minions kill each other faster. So that means it's really hard to stack a big wave. So it's actually going to be hard to 4-wave crash, which was the logical approach now that wave 4 is a cannon. And you still will be able to 4-wave crash in some games, especially if your opponent hits the wave a bit. So that can be a good strategy. The problem with a 4-wave crash is the enemy jungler can finish their full clear and gank top before you get that wave 4 in, which can be quite annoying. Where before, they can level 3 gank top after 3 camps before you crash wave 3. But the problem with that is if you didn't die to it, then they would lose quite a lot. They'd be really far down in tempo. But now a full clear into top gank, even if they waste 30 seconds or 40 seconds beating you up, they don't really lose that much. So be careful with a 4-wave crash. Do it if you know you're not going to get punished for it, and make sure you have your ward down. But I'd say more often than not, a wave 2 crash, I will have to test it, don't get me wrong, this is just theory at this point, but a wave 2 crash is going to be the play. Because if you take a big level 1 trade and you do a lot of damage to the wave, with the wave killing, your wave killing the enemy wave faster, it's going to be a bit harder to slow that down for a 3-wave crash, and wave 3 is not a cannon anyway. So if you crash wave 3, a normal wave, the wave bouncing back to you will be a cannon wave, which means it's quite annoying for you to punish your opponent and try to trim the wave and freeze, as they have that cannon wave to help them if you try to fight them in the wave. Now, that does mean if you do get a 3-wave crash and cheater, it's going to be harder for your opponent to one-shot the wave, as wave 4 will be a cannon, but cheatering will be a lot less gold, because you're not killing the cannon minion. However, they have balanced it a little bit. You can see here you get 20 more gold from just the gold you get over time, which means if you do get around 16 out of 18, maybe 15 or 14, you can still pick up a longsword. So as long as you're not missing too much of the early fun, you can still cheat a recall. It's not going to be against the rules, or by any means, it's still going to be a strategy. But I'd say most of the time, a 2-wave crash, let wave 3 come out and try to maintain pro, stack that with wave 4, maybe crash that together. That could be the play. I'm definitely going to have to test it, but I'd say the default of wave 3 crash is definitely going to change in this season. Now moving on to towers here. So towers being buffed to be a lot stronger does make tower diving a lot harder. 50 per stack up to 250 is quite a lot. I'd say it's pretty rare it's going to be the difference maker. The problem with this is everyone's so used to how much damage the tower does, myself included. So it's going to be a bit of an adjustment. You feel like, oh, I can dive this, I can tank 3 shots. Maybe you died to 2. So definitely it's going to take some adjusting. And it lasts a lot longer now, where before you could drop the tower aggro and wait 3 seconds and then go back in for the dive. Now it's 5, so that's going to be definitely taking some adjustments. Now with the fortification being reduced, I wonder how they're going to tackle lane swaps with this, but 50%, not the biggest change in the world. I'd say for champions like Grasp Jace, that's going to be nice. You can actually hit the tower a bit early, but most of the time, it's not going to be that big of a change. Now, for champion bounties, again, a really small change. We've gone through all the big boys, but first 50 gold is a negative stat, so that means champions that are doing poorly early game, 0-1, 0-2, they're worth less than before. So I like that change. I don't really like when my bot lane is just feeding, giving way too much gold over. I prefer if they're feeding and not giving much over. So not that big of a problem, I'd say. Overall net win for the game. So we can see here, this is just the season changes, nothing really new here. But as for the champions, so Ashe, Kalista, all champions that I never want to see in top lane, don't worry about that. But for the items, so Blood of Discussor is pretty much the Black Cleaver for AP champions, which is going to be really good on champions like Rumble, the beefy, or champs like Mordekaiser. These beefy AP bruiser type champs are going to use it really well. Especially champs that don't really build void stuff, like Mordekaiser, he's definitely going to like this one. I will definitely have to test it on a champ like Gwen, where you want to be building Magic Pen around your third item anyway, a lot of the time. But I could see it being as a good replacement for Riftmaker, as Riftmaker just feels a little bit weak. And even though Nash's Rush is very popular on Gwen, I'm not a big fan of it. It does make you quite squishy. So this could be a great middle ground. Definitely going to see how it feels, especially up against tanks. I could imagine it being quite strong. Even on champs like Vladimir, you can do more of a drain tank build on him with Bloodletter's Curse, so definitely a good change overall, definitely an item that was needed for top lane. Now, as for Heartsteel, it's not really that different. The main change is it's going to feel stronger on champions that have a lot of HP stacking in their kits. So abilities like Cho'Gath, Ulti, Silent W, they're going to like it a bit more. And champs that were just building it for the stacks but don't really have much HP in their kit, they're not going to like it as much. So pretty good change overall. Now, Unending Despair, this was definitely needed. When you see champs like Jace rushing it, this is definitely a problem. I'm definitely going to have to test it though. I still think it's going to be a great item. It might even be rushable. They're trying to make it more of a second or third item. And just off the top of my head, it does look like a second item. But we're definitely going to have to test it because dual resistances does feel nice. Where before, if you verse a champion like Ken and Tom, you wouldn't really want to build a full MR item, but now you can just rush this, get dual resist, and the cooldown of the passive being 4 seconds, not 5, means it does feel a little bit nicer. The damage is lower on it, of course, which means the healing is lower, but if you build it as a second item, with an item for your first core that gives you a lot of HP, definitely fine. So I'd imagine on Jace, you'd probably go Eclipse into Fimbulwinter into this now, if you want to do the tank build. And for other champions that would be building this early on, like a Volibear, he would normally build it second anyway, so that's not really going to change. Now, as for Warmogs, I'll say the biggest idea behind this change is just to nerf Dr. Mundo rushing it, because first item Mundo level 9 with Warmogs, demolishing your tower, you get him 200 HP, he backs up and heals, definitely a toxic strategy. So now you have to build it as a second item. 1500 HP was definitely doable by level 9, especially if you had Grasp and Cookies, but 2000 HP, pretty much impossible, so you're going to be building the second, most likely Heartsteel into Warmogs on Mundos now, so definitely a good change overall. I do think that strategy was a little bit OP, especially in lower ranks. So now you have to build it later on. You do lose the movement speed in combat as well, so it's more of a tanky item as opposed to more of a bruiser juggernauty type item, I'd say, is how it felt before. So definitely a good change overall. Now, moving on to the runes. So these runes don't really affect top lane that much. All these runes are trash that they removed anyway. We don't really care about that. So Deeport, this is in the domination tree, keep in mind, which is really hard for top lane to take. But if the runes are OP, of course people will take them. So we'll go through them. Now, Deeport, if you want the enemy jungle, they're going to last a lot longer. They get extra HP and they last longer. Not really worth sacrificing laning runes for this. You don't want to be giving up bone plating or maybe sudden impact or anything like that for this type of rune. So definitely not a thing that you'll default to on top lane. Now, Sixth Sense. If you walk past a ward that's unseen, of course it's going to ping it for you and you're going to be able to clear it later on in the game when you're level 11. So again, this is mainly for supports, mainly for maybe assassins, but not really that you're going to be taking on top lane that much. For Grizzly Momentum, each champ takedown you get trinket ability haste. Again, you don't really care that much about your sweeper or your yellow trinket being lower cooldown for top lane. Maybe on Jax, but on Jax you're not going to take the resolve tree, the domination tree, so definitely not a thing that's worth taking. Now, this one is the most annoying, I'd say, because there's not many top lane champs that's going to want to take it, but there are some champs that are going to be really annoying. Champs like Karthus are going to be quite broken with this rune. I don't really know what they're thinking behind it, but there's not really many top lane champs that are super ultra reliant that would take this. If you think about top lane champs like Jax, Aurelia, Camille, Mordekaiser, so on and so forth, not really going to be worth taking it on them. There might be some cooking around. Maybe champs like Rumble would take it. Champs like Kennen actually would be quite good to take this on. You're definitely going to have to test it and see how it feels. But I'd say all in all, not really that good on AD tops, but AP tops that are pretty ulti reliant, like Aurora, Rumble, Kennen, that can be quite strong on them. Alright everyone, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm going to be testing it straight away. The patch drops in Korea before all other regions, so I'm definitely going to be sending it straight away, and I'll be pumping content, so look forward to that. Let me know what you'd like to see me cover in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.